Hey guys, you know our planet is the only one that we know of that supports life, but that doesn't mean that all species on Earth live in the same conditions. There's a whole range of different ecosystems that have given rise to wildly different looking animal and plant life. So for today's video, we're going to explore the strangest complex web of living organisms such as plants, animals, fungi, and microorganisms, and the way that they interact with one another and their surrounding environment, which includes other elements like water, air, soil, and sunlight. These systems can vary widely in terms of size and type, from vast deserts and oceans to tiny ponds and patches of soil. Within each ecosystem, organisms rely on each other and the environment to survive, reproduce, and evolve. And it's this interconnectedness that creates a balanced system where each element, from the smallest microbe to the largest predator, plays a role in the health and stability of everything else. Ecosystems. It's another aspect of why ecosystems are so important. For instance, a forest ecosystem, trees provide oxygen and habitats for animals to live in, birds to help control insect populations, and fungi break down organic material. Their resilience is vital for maintaining balance, as the loss of even a single species can have wide-reaching effects. In modern times, many ecosystems face threat from human activities, including deforestation, pollution, habitat destruction, and climate change, and some have been pushed to the brink of collapse. The destruction of coral reefs, for example, impacts fisheries, tourism, and coastal protection, showing just how the degradation of a single ecosystem can have widespread consequences. So, the Earth hosts a wide variety of ecosystems, each with its own unique combinations of climate, geography, and organisms. While ecosystems do vary greatly across regions, certain types are particularly common and play important roles in maintaining global biodiversity and environmental stability. For example, and boreal forests are the ones that are found in colder regions like Canada and Russia and are mainly composed of conifers like pine and spruce. Across the globe, forest ecosystems are integral to carbon storage and water regulation, making them vital components of the entire planet's climate system. But what about grassland? So grasslands are also hugely important, covering vast areas in temperate regions. They mainly take on the forms of prairies in North America, pampas in South America, steppes in Eurasia, and savannas in Africa and Australia. Grasslands, as the name suggests, have grasses as the dominant vegetation, with fewer trees and generally a dry climate. In tropical savannas, rainfall is seasonal, supporting large herbivores like zebras, elephants, and antelope, which are preyed upon by predators like lions and hyenas. Temperate grasslands have fewer large animals but are rich in smaller mammals, birds, and insects. And grasslands are also the ones that are important for agriculture and livestock. Snakes, scorpions, and camels have adapted behaviors or physical traits that help conserve water. Deserts therefore play a role in regulating temperatures and have a unique plant and animal species that thrive in those conditions. Freshwater ecosystems include rivers, lakes, ponds, and wetlands, which cover only a small portion of the Earth's surface but are incredibly diverse. They're essential for drinking water, agriculture, and industry, and they're habitats for fish, amphibians, and various plants. Freshwater ecosystems also play a vital role in nutrient cycling, flood control, and water purification, and wetlands in particular provide new breeding grounds for birds and act as filters, removing pollutants from water before it flows into rivers and oceans. And then there's the marine ecosystems. They cover over 70% of the Earth's surface and are the most extensive and include oceans, coral reefs, and estuaries. Oceans, of course, are home to a vast range of life, from microscopic plankton to the largest whales, and they're essential. They've led to the development of some peculiar places in terms of environment and the life forms that live there. Let's take a look at a few. Let's start with hydrothermal vents. Hydrothermal vents are amazing deep-sea ecosystems that form where tectonic plates separate on the ocean floor, which allows water to seep through the cracks and come into contact with magma beneath the Earth's crust. This then heats the water to extreme temperatures, sometimes more than 750 degrees Fahrenheit or 400 degrees Celsius, which then surges back out of the ocean floor, carrying dissolved minerals such as iron, sulfur, and manganese with it. When the hot mineral-rich water meets the cold seawater, it causes the minerals to solidify and form these chimney-like structures around the vent openings, creating environments called black smokers or white smokers, depending on the minerals that are there. Now, what makes these vent ecosystems so unique and unusual is that they exist completely independent of sunlight. And at those depths, temperatures, and levels of toxicity, they're completely in-house that thrive in these conditions. Some of the most interesting species found near these hydrothermal vents include giant tube worms, which can reach up to 6 feet or 2 meters in length and have no mouths or digestive systems, instead having chemosynthetic bacteria within their bodies. Then there's the Pompeii worm, which is one of the most heat-tolerant animals on Earth. They can endure temperatures of more than 176 degrees Fahrenheit or 80 degrees Celsius, thanks to a layer of protective bacteria that coats its body. The bacteria on it shield the worm from the heat and also produce nutrients for it, and in return, the worm releases a mucus that the bacteria feed on. With worms at the base of the food web, hydrothermal vents can then support a variety of unique species, including vent crabs, clams, mussels, and even shrimp. Many of these have developed adaptations to survive these high levels of toxicity. For instance, certain vent shrimp have developed specialized eyes that allow them to detect faint Enceladus, both of which may have hydrothermal activity beneath their icy surfaces. Let's take a look at the Antarctic dry valleys. They're one of the most extreme and otherworldly environments on Earth, and located within the Transantarctic Mountains, have a harsh climate, almost complete lack of moisture, and of course, an alien landscape. The dry valleys are some of the coldest and driest places on the planet, with temperatures usually being below freezing year-round. And with very little rainfall, they are technically the largest polar deserts on Earth. Now, usually you wouldn't expect there to be very much life in such an extreme place, but the unique conditions of the dry valleys have instead created an ecosystem where only the hardiest forms of life can survive. With little organic matter to support typical food chains, everything here relies on the basics. Microorganisms are the main element of this ecosystem, and they have evolved adaptations to withstand freezing temperatures, high salinity, and extreme dryness. One of the things that supports microbial life here, the dry valleys also contain a few permanent liquid bodies of water, such as Lake Vanda, Lake Bonny, and Lake Friesel. These lakes are incredibly salty, as the high salinity prevents them from freezing completely, even in the cold Antarctic winters. Beneath the frozen surfaces of these lakes lie layers of dense, salty water where anaerobic microbes have adapted to the cold, dark conditions and use chemosynthesis to survive. Unlike other aquatic ecosystems, these lakes don't have any fish or other forms of higher life, but they are home to a rich community of bacteria. Let's head over to some cloud forests. They are rare, misty, and fertile ecosystems that exist in tropical and subtropical mountainous regions, typically at heights of between 3,200 and 11,000 feet, or about 1,000 and 3,500 meters above sea level. Unlike typical rainforests, which receive sunlight around the year, cloud forests are defined by the way that they have constant cloud cover, which cloaks the forest canopy in a layer at different levels. The constant moisture and moderate temperatures also allows plants and animals to thrive in microhabitats that remain stable throughout the year. Certain species, like the rare resplendent quetzal in Central America or the endangered Andean speckled bear, are highly adapted to the ecosystem and rely on its specific climatic conditions. Insects, amphibians, and birds do particularly well in cloud forests, partly because of the unique resources provided by the epiphytes. Many frogs, such as glass frogs with translucent skin, thrive in the high humidity, which is ideal for their skin and life cycle. Bird species like hummingbirds do well from this too, feeding on the nectar from the flowering epiphytes and being important pollinators. But because of the cloud cover and unique plant adaptations, cloud forests do play an important role in water regulation, capturing and slowly releasing moisture into surrounding ecosystems. These regions are, though, hugely sensitive to deforestation. Rising temperatures can shift the elevation at which clouds form. Salt flats include Bolivia's Salar de Uyuni, Utah's Bonneville Salt Flats, and Namibia's Etosha Pan, all of which are known for their extreme environment, with high salt concentrations, intense sunlight, very little vegetation, and extreme temperature fluctuations. The ecosystem of a salt flat is as unusual as the landscape itself, as because of the high salt concentration, only very specialized organisms can survive. These microorganisms, which include certain bacteria and archaea, can tolerate or even need high salt levels for survival, and are what often cause the unusual colors that are seen in some salt flats. In fact, the shades of pink, red, or orange actually help to protect the microorganisms from intense ultraviolet radiation. Some brine shrimp and salt-tolerant algae can survive in salt-rich waters that occasionally cover the salt flats after rainfall. For example, the brine shrimp in the Great Salt Lake in Utah has adapted to withstand the lake's high salinity, and in regions where temporary pools of water form, they reproduce quickly to take advantage of the so unique that they're leading to their slow destruction. As saline minerals accumulate on the surface, they create natural deposits of lithium, potassium, and other valuable minerals. And the Salar de Uyuni, for example, contains a large portion of the world's lithium reserves, which is an essential element for the production of batteries. The mining of this resource, particularly as the demand increases with the electric vehicle industry, has led to fears that a number of salt flat ecosystems are now at risk of collapse. Here's a good one: kelp forests. They're underwater ecosystems that are formed by large, fast-growing kelp, which is a type of brown algae that can reach heights of over 100 feet or 30 meters. These forests are found along coastlines in cool, nutrient-rich waters, mainly in regions like the Pacific coasts of North and South America, parts of Australia, and Southern Africa. Unlike many other marine ecosystems that rely on coral reefs for rigidity, kelp forests provide a vertical structure, and in doing so provide the ideal conditions for crabs, lobsters, and starfish, with the seafloor supporting even more. In the North Pacific, sea otters are vital to how the forest develops. By feeding on sea urchins, which graze on kelp holdfasts, which are the root-like structures that anchor kelp to the ocean floor, otters prevent overgrazing and maintain the balance of the ecosystem. In regions without otters, sea urchin populations can decimate kelp forests and prevent an ecosystem from even forming. Fish species, too, in kelp forests are also specialized to thrive in this unique habitat. Rockfish, for example, hide among the kelp and use it for their protection and to hunt smaller prey. The canopy can attract species like the Garibaldi and the nudibranch, a type of sea slug, both of which feed on algae that's caught in the kelp's blades. Larger fish like the giant sea bass hunt within the forest, showing just how many different species can come to rely on these ecosystems. Let's talk about Socotra. The island of Socotra create a range of habitats. One of the island's most unusual plants, for example, is of course the dragon's blood tree, which has an umbrella-shaped canopy and dark red sap, which was historically used for medicinal and dyeing purposes. The dragon's blood tree has adapted to Socotra's dry climate by developing a structure that allows it to capture and conserve moisture. The branches fan out at the top, increasing shade over the roots and reducing water evaporation, which is a strategy that allows the tree to survive. Another unusual plant species on the island is the Socotran desert rose, which is a thick-trunked succulent with a bulbous base that stores water, which of course helps it to survive the long dry seasons. Its swollen base sort of looks like an elephant's foot, with bright pink flowers that bloom after it rains. In total, the island is home to over 700 plant species, about a third of which are endemic, meaning they're only found on Socotra. Some animal life too here is fascinating, with the island having a large number of endemic animal species, particularly reptiles. Peat, which is a dense, partially decayed organic material that's mainly made up of plant matter. These bogs are usually found in cool, temperate regions with high rainfall and develop over thousands of years as the material builds up faster than it can decompose. The result is a thick, acidic, waterlogged mat that is low in nutrients and oxygen and creates a pretty harsh environment where only specialized plants and animals can live. Peat bogs cover around 3% of the Earth's land surface, but they play a major role in carbon storage and hydrology. The high acidity there and low oxygen result in a slow rate of decomp. And this creates an environment where plants that would otherwise decay remain preserved for much longer. With peat layers sometimes reaching depths of over 32 feet or 10 meters, sphagnum moss is the foundation of most peat bogs, capable of holding up to 20 times its weight in water. The unusual ecosystem of peat bogs is home to a specialized set of animals and microorganisms that have adapted to the bog's challenging conditions, and bog lemmings are adapted to live directly within the wetland. Peat bogs are some of the most efficient carbon sinks on Earth, storing about 30% of the world's soil carbon despite their small size. This makes them invaluable in regulating atmospheric carbon dioxide and countering the effects of any climate change. They are, though, highly vulnerable to disturbances, including from drainage, agriculture, and peat extraction. When bogs are drained, the peat begins to quickly decompose, releasing large amounts of carbon into the atmosphere and contributing to greenhouse gas emissions. Let's explore some karst caves. They're geological formations that have been created by the slow erosion of soluble rock like limestone, dolomite, and gypsum over thousands or even millions of years. As rainwater, which is slightly acidic due to the presence of carbon dioxide, seeps into the ground, it slowly dissolves the rock and carved out complex networks of tunnels, chambers, and sinkholes. These caves, which are found in regions called karst landscape, having no eyes at all and instead using specialized sensory organs to detect movement and prey in the water. Food sources in these karst caves isn't exactly plentiful because the lack of sunlight, which limits production by photosynthesis. As a result, the food web within these caves often relies on external material that gets in from the surface. Some caves are also supported by chemosynthetic bacteria that can convert inorganic substances into energy, providing a food source at the base of the food chain. And those bacteria are often found in mineral-rich cave walls, forming biofilms that other cave organisms can feed on. But bats, too, are another important factor in many karst cave ecosystems, particularly in the entrance zones or shallow cave areas where they roost. These caves provide a safe refuge for bats to sleep during the day and hibernate through the winter. Bat guano, or droppings, builds up on the cave floors, and it's an important source of nutrition for invertebrates, fungi, and bacteria. Entire ecosystems can be built around guano piles, supporting creatures like beetles in flat, low-lying areas with sandy soils and extensive wetlands. The result is water that's soft, acidic, and nutrient-poor, and creates an unusual environment that only highly specialized plants, animals, and microorganisms can live in. The acidity here and low nutrient levels in blackwater rivers create a very harsh environment that challenges most typical freshwater species. They are, though, still home to great biodiversity. Fish species such as the neon tetra, angelfish, and piranhas have evolved to tolerate this acidic, low-nutrient water. This is really true in the Amazon's blackwater rivers, where the lack of light and dark water intensify the displays of colors, which acts as a means of communication or camouflage in the dimly lit environment. Blackwater rivers are highly reliant on the surrounding floodplain forests, known as varzea forests in the Amazon. These forests experience seasonal flooding, where the rivers overflow and the flood surrounding lands, transforming the forest into an extension of the river itself, a digestive system that can break down the tough plant material that finds in the flooded forests. And this bird is often called the stink bird because of its smell. It's a great example of how unusual a species can become when it's had to adapt to such challenging environments. Moving on to the blue holes, they're natural underwater sinkholes or marine caves that go down deep into the ocean floor, and they create strange environments unlike any other. Found in coastal areas around the world, especially in places like the Bahamas, Belize, and the South China Sea, these blue holes can reach depths of up to 1,000 feet or over 300 meters, and they become popular places for exploration because of their clear, deep blue color. They are geological formations that have been created by the erosion of carbonate rock, such as limestone, over thousands of years, which then leads to the collapse of cave roofs and then the flooding that forms the deeper blue color. The uppermost layer, where sunlight can reach, becomes home to marine life like sharks, fish, corals, and algae. But the further down you go, unlike hydrothermal vents, which are found along tectonic plate boundaries and have extremely high temperatures, cold seeps are usually found on the continental margins and other stable regions. The methane and hydrogen sulfide-rich fluids are released from these seeps that create a unique chemical environment on the barren seabed. The main source of energy at these cold seeps is chemosynthesis, and the chemosynthetic bacteria that are the base of the food web includes various species such as mussels, tube worms, and clams. Tube worms at cold seeps, for example, can grow several feet long and lack a digestive system entirely, instead relying on bacteria within their bodies which provide them with all the nutrients. There's a symbiosis that allows mussels and clams to thrive in an environment where there aren't any other food sources, and they're often found in clusters in dense communities around the seep site that in turn form mini ecosystems that support a range of other organisms. Other species like crabs, fish, and shrimp also make their homes around cold seeps, taking advantage of the food resources provided by the primary producers. This leads to the development of highly specialized ecosystems with species that have evolved to make the best use of the seasonal flooding and drying. These ecosystems can be found in places like California's Central Valley, parts of the northeastern United States, and anywhere else with Mediterranean-type climates. When filled with water, these pools become hotspots of biological activity, supporting a range of species, many of which are uniquely adapted. Amphibians like the spotted salamander, wood frog, and fairy shrimp are particularly suited to these vernal pools. With fairy shrimp, for example, laying eggs that can withstand the drought, remain dormant in the dried-up pool bed until the water returns, and then at that point they quickly hatch and reproduce. Species like wood frogs and salamanders also use these vernal pools for breeding, as temporary pools don't have any fish, which would usually prey on their eggs and larvae. By the time the pool recedes, the young amphibians are mature enough to leave the water and move into nearby forests or other habitats. Plant life in these vernal pools is also highly specialized, forms tunnels beneath the crust as it solidifies. Found in volcanic regions, of course, like Hawaii, the Canary Islands, Iceland, and certain parts of the Pacific Northwest, lava tubes then go on to sustain unusual ecosystems. The environment within one is stable but extreme, with low light levels, high humidity, and temperatures that remain relatively constant year-round. Since no sunlight reaches these caverns, there is no photosynthesis and no plant life at all. Instead, the base of the food web is usually made up of unique microbial communities. Chemolithotropic bacteria, which obtain energy by oxidizing inorganic molecules such as iron and sulfur compounds found in the rock, are extremely important to these places, with these bacteria forming biofilms on the cave walls and floors, which can then be eaten by other organisms. These microorganisms are incredibly resilient, tolerating the high acidity and the lack of nutrition, and some of these microbes can even help with the formation of the caves by breaking down minerals in the rock. Animal life here is also prey in the darkness, where they feed on smaller invertebrates that also live there. Other creatures like millipedes and isopods further help the ecosystem by breaking down organic matter. Now we're going to look at tepuis. Tepuis are flat-topped, steep-sided plateaus that are mainly found in the Guiana highlands of Venezuela and into parts of Guyana and Brazil. Sometimes referred to as the islands in the sky, tepuis rise sharply from the surrounding landscape, and sometimes they reach heights of over 9,800 feet or 3,000 meters. They are some of the oldest geological formations of the Earth, with origins tracing back to the Precambrian period around 2 billion years ago. And because of their isolation from surrounding ecosystems, they've developed unique ones with large numbers of species that aren't found anywhere else. One of the most famous tepuis is Mount Roraima, which was mentioned in the novel The Lost World, where it was the land that the prehistoric creatures had survived in isolation. Pebble toad, which is a small black toad that has a unique defense mechanism. When threatened, sees it tucking its limbs into its body and then rolls down the steep slopes to quickly escape. Certain bird species too, such as the tepui swift and the Roraiman antpitta, have adapted to the high-altitude conditions too. Some insects found here have developed adaptations to the moist and often misty environment, while others have evolved mutualistic relationships with the plants, helping in pollination or being the prey for carnivorous ones. Cut off from the outside world, tepuis are fascinating places to study and explore, and show how species can evolve in isolation by adapting. With such specialization, though, comes a great deal of risk, because if conditions change too much, there won't be anywhere for them to go. It's ecosystems like these that are at most risk from a wider climate change across the planet. And while they have for a long time managed to avoid pressures from elsewhere, this may not be possible in the future. So let's wrap it up. The varied nature of our